Hello from the free state of Florida. This is the Dr. Tommy Show.
It's the show the establishment warned you about.
That's right, it's the Dr. Tommy Show. We're glad you're here. This is Friday edition, broadcasting from Echelon Health Studios from the free state of Florida, as Stephen was so kindly able to introduce to you. Thank you, Stephen, by the way, Stephen Kufferman. He is the official joke therapist of the Dr. Tommy Show. He's an interesting guy. He came into town. We've been working together kind of, I guess you call it under the covers, not really. He had kind of a, well, he's an interesting guy. He was introduced to me by a patient's friend whose friend it was. So we were doing was I was talking to a patient about podcasts, and he said, I know a guy. He's got a friend who's an interesting guy. He's got some kind of different ideas about therapy and medicine and things like that. And he's a doctor, and he's in Connecticut. And I said, well, that's interesting. He said, I think he'd like to be on your podcast. I was like, well, we started the podcast in 2015, and then throughout the different years, there's been some times when I haven't done it as often, and now I've kind of committed. I'm going to do it at least once a week. Try to do it twice a week or even more, because the more times you do the podcast, the more times you get seen. That's just a little inside baseball there. But anyway, so I said, okay, well, I'll meet with Dr. Kufferman if that's what he wants to do. So sure enough, I got in touch with this guy, and he's Yale trained. He's from Yale. He's actually an internist, and he's got an interesting philosophy. Just to give you a little background, he spent a lot of time in his youth in South America, in Brazil in particular, and he was a member of I don't want to call it a cult, but it's called this way. It was a non-religious church, and it was called Church of the First Harvest, I believe, and he learned about reincarnation and got involved in some of the mysticism. And he's used that to give us some insight here with our patients, and not just our patients. Any patients can go actually see Dr. Kufferman. Go to drtommy.com/podcast, and then you'll see his picture there. He's underneath, and he's going to have his own website. But for now, we just have him there, and it's free. There's no copay. There's no insurance involved. This is a community service, so to speak, a joint venture between Echelon Health and Dr. Kufferman. And Dr. Kufferman is an adjunct of our practice. He's not employed by me. So if something happens between you and he, that's between you and he. I'm just a conduit to allow him to kind of share, and I think he's got a lot of things to share. If you have thin skin, maybe he's not the right person for you. He's kind of direct, and he's very straightforward about what he believes. And so Dr. Kufferman is at, like I said, drtommy.com/podcast. I'm sorry, drtommy.com/podcast, and you can just click on his face there. Alternatively, you can go to drtommy.com/joke therapy. And like I said, he's the official joke therapist for the Dr. Tommy Show. Today, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things, hodgepodge. One is about concierge medicine practices from my standpoint as a physician, trying to talk to patients and let them understand what we do and differentiate that between concierge medicine. Regular traditional medicine is kind of easy, but differentiate concierge medicine from direct primary care, and then dispel some of the rumors that are about concierge medicine. And then I also wanted to give a little tiny bit about starting one of these practices. If you're interested in starting one, what I've experienced. This is year 13, I think. And so I've learned a few things, and so I'll share that. And then I also wanted to talk about heavy hitters and the heavyweight champions of yesteryear, well, all the way up to now. But I'm going to give you my opinion of the top 5 heavyweight champions who were the hardest hitters. And so the reason I want to talk about concierge medicine is because concierge medicine is something that people want, and they don't know they want it. That's one of the things that Steve Jobs was so good at doing. Was he developed the iPhone, and when he developed the iPhone, he says, I'm making something that people want, and they don't even know they want it. So concierge medicine is not new. It's been around for, close to 30 years now, I guess. but it's new in that it's not been around since, let's say, as long as insurance-based medicine's been around, which has been around since, probably the late 70s, early 80s is when insurance became the dominant player in the medical care industry. And it kind of shifted the way people interact with their physicians so that they weren't interacting any longer with someone who they know necessarily. They were interacting whoever happened to be their insurance quote unquote provider. And that's when that whole nomenclature became known, and the providers and primary care physicians and subspecialists and this, that, and the other. And you no longer had a relationship with your doctor the way it used to be. So concierge medicine arose to differentiate itself from that. And what it did was it said, look, we're going to become more like it was in the beginning, where patients knew their physician, and we're going to provide this as an alternative. And as many new things happened, it was only for the wealthy initially, just like the first vacuum cleaners were only for the wealthy. The first indoor water was only for the wealthy. First electricity was only for the wealthy, telephones, etc. But now it's common. Concierge medicine practices are in most metropolitan areas. I wouldn't say they're in every one, but I would say probably every major metropolitan area has one within an hour. So, and then what the difference is. So concierge medicine, if you're out there and you're a patient, you've never heard of this, or you're a person, never heard of it. Concierge medicine basically removes the barriers between you and your doctor in terms of talking to them, scheduling with them, being seen in a timely fashion, and being seen in a timely fashion that's long enough for you to be taken care of so that you're not rushed. And the way they do this is they charge a fee, and that fee basically makes it to where the patients and doctors have enough time to see each other and talk about the things that are important to each of them and take care of the needs of the patient in a more, I think, humane fashion than the traditional 8-minute, 5-minute insurance practice type of interaction that most people have. I'm not saying that every practice is like that, obviously, but you know yourself. If you're either working in one or you go to one, you know what I'm talking about. So what is the differences between concierge medicine to begin with? So there's two varieties. This is the first thing I want to talk about. One variety is an insurance-based practice that takes patients and gives them a concierge medicine membership for a fee on top of their insurance. So you have Blue Cross. You go see Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis takes your insurance. He charges you a copay. You maintain your insurance, you pay your copay, and then you pay Dr. Davis a fee, whether it be yearly or monthly, and it may be $1,000, it may be more, it's usually more. In exchange for that, Dr. Davis either gives you more attention over the other patients who do not have concierge medicine, or maybe he does that exclusively and he just happens to continue to take insurance because he likes to. That's type A. Type B is what I do. And concierge medicine is, for me, a fee to the patient that is entirely inclusive of everything. I do not care if you have insurance. I do not care if you don't have insurance. The price is the same no matter what. And so when patients see me, I do not take their insurance or process it in any fashion. The only way we use their insurance is to help them. So if patients have labs that need paid for, we give them their, we use their insurance to help them pay for their labs. If they have a MRI they need, we help them use their insurance for that and so forth. So that's the difference. Type A, type B, you want to call it, or non-insurance based concierge medicine and insurance based, however you want to say it. I say that's the two major differences. Now, the second difference that I want to talk about is the difference between direct primary care and concierge medicine. Now, this is where there's a little bit of, well, not a little bit, there's a lot of overlap. And the overlap is in that they both do not take insurance, right? So direct primary care practices are just like concierge medicine practices in that matter. They do not take insurance. What do they do differently? Well, direct primary care practices tend to have a lower fee. And it used to be that the fee was less than $100 was the primary way you could notice or be sure that it was a direct primary care practice. They said, well, we are lower than $100. It has come now where most direct primary cares, maybe some are lower than $100. but most of them are a little bit higher now because of inflation. Now, the other difference between what I do, concierge medicine, and what a lot of direct primary cares do, and this is also maybe with concierge medicine too, is they don't have a fee that's based on they have a fee that's based on ages. So, for instance, you may pay a different fee if you're 18 to 30, and then if you're 30 to 50 or 50 above and 70 or above or whatever. We have the same fee for adults all across the board. You're 18 years old, you pay the same price as if you're 78 years old. And we have our reasons for doing that. Now, DPC tends to have more layers, not all of them, but that's one thing. But anyway, DPC practices are more affordable, so to speak. They also tend to have less availability. I say they tend to. I don't say they have to blanket, but I know a lot of direct primary care practices, for instance, do not take text messages or phone calls after office hours. Or if they do, they may charge a fee. The other thing that's different about direct primary care is they have usually a higher patient load. For instance, our practice will never have more than 300 patients. Direct primary care practices tend to have at least 300 and upwards of 600, maybe more. But I think that's the main thing one of the things is they have more patients. And I would assume that means that they have busier schedules. But either way, they have more patients and they have lower fees, and they tend to potentially have fewer after-hours services. They may not take text messages at all. In our practice, concierge medicine, we do take text messages. Our practice, concierge medicine, is all-inclusive. Direct primary care, a lot of times will have add-ons. So if you have a suturing, for instance, that's extra fee. In our practice, in our concierge medicine practice, the fee is all-inclusive of everything. So if it's a suturing, whether it's a joint injection, if it's a steroid injection or an antibiotic injection, that's all inclusive. Direct primary care, from my understanding and from my experience, tends to add that on a la carte. So it's just a little different. So direct primary care versus concierge medicine, price difference, patient load difference, possible service difference, and then concierge medicine versus insurance-based concierge medicine, plus or minus the necessity to have insurance. That's, if you're out there and you're interested, that's the major things that are different. Now, shifting gears. If you want to start a direct primary care practice or a concierge medicine practice or a concierge medicine practice with insurance, there's a few different ways of doing it. The first way is probably a common way is to start a practice, and you can basically choose to become either direct primary care or concierge medicine after you have amassed a certain number of patients through an insurance-based practice. So, for instance, you may have a practice and you say, okay, I am full now. I have 2,000 patients or whatever they get nowadays. And now I'm going to say I'm now concierge medicine and you have to pay me a fee, or I'm now direct primary care and you have to pay me a fee in order to stay on as a patient. And I'm going to anticipate that the patient load will drop by, a factor of, 10. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just to start off doing it. And that's the way I did it. And I started off as a practice that did not take insurance and was cash pay. And if you do it this way, the way I did it, you're going to have money. And one of the ways you can have money is to be wealthy, or know someone who's wealthy who will give you the money or loan you the money. And the other way is to bootstrap it. And that means you have to basically pay your way. And the way I did it was I paid my way. When I first started, I worked urgent care. This was in 2013. And I also worked in my practice, and I worked in my practice during the week, and the practice was low volume. And over time, I got enough patients that I didn't have to work as much urgent care. And slowly, after, 10 years about, I stopped working urgent care at all. And so I have not worked urgent care now for going on 3 years. That is the ultimate goal, obviously, when you're working for yourself, is that you never work for somebody else. And that's what I did. Now, I wanted to step back too. back to choosing between concierge medicine and direct primary care. Another thing that I did not talk about, which is fairly new, and I say in the last 5 years, is the corporate world has gotten into concierge medicine. And so when I say that, I mean your local healthcare, whether it be hospitals or physician groups, they have started their own concierge medicine practices within their medical care unit or healthcare unit. So that's a different variety of concierge medicine. So it's not the owner operator, which was typical. Typically what happened was there was an owner who operated, and the practice was called Echelon Health, or the practice was called, whatever, so-and-so's concierge medicine practice. Now you're seeing it pop up to where there's local healthcare corporations who are starting their own. So that's a differentiation too. I think the flavor is different. For me, it would be difficult, not impossible, but it'd be difficult for me to do what I do working for someone else. Meaning I wouldn't want to be a concierge doctor working for somebody else if I was not the operator. That's just my personal preference. But back to choosing to start up, that's another way you could start up. So if you were a physician and you wanted to do concierge medicine, you could always get hired. Concierge medicine today is a good resource if you want to find out where there's some job openings. But I know that it's becoming more and more popular. When I first started, I was the only concierge medicine doctor in Lutz, and that was in 2013. And it was a long time before there's any others. There's a few here. Lutz is north of Tampa. Tampa is the city. Lutz is the suburb. So Tampa, Lutz are next to each other. Lutz is a little bit more rural. But anyway, suburban. And but anyway, when I first started, there was very few concierge practices. Actually, in the greater Tampa Bay area, I think there was 3 or 4. I think there were 4 when I first started. Maybe I was the 4th. Anyway, so now there's a lot. And there's a lot of DPC practices too, which is all good, because the more people who are involved in this, the more likely it's to become well known, and the more likely it's to flourish, and the more likely people are to be able to get the type of care they want, and hopefully kind of change the way healthcare is delivered. Because right now, the way healthcare is delivered is, I like to tell patients, doctors and patients are kind of a necessary evil to the modern healthcare industry. You as a patient are seen as the person or thing that can generate codes. And the doctor is the one who can assign codes. And then the codes are fed to an insurance company, which then generates a check. And in the process of doing that, the insurance company employs a lot of people. And it's basically a medical industrial complex. And so what you see is patients and doctors are not the primary important hub of a modern American healthcare system. They are the necessary evils. They are there because they have to be there. I told a patient once, if there was a way in the future that we could make it, or they could make it to where they can make healthcare and do it without doctors or patients, they'd do it. And it seems kind of ridiculous to say it, but we're getting to the point where the doctors pretty soon may be out of the equation with AI and things like that. For sure, doctors as a quote unquote provider are not going to be, well, they haven't been, and they will continue to be less common in the general context of healthcare because of the proliferation of called mid-levels, nurse practitioners and PAs, which are nothing against them, but you will see more and more nurse practitioners and PAs doing the jobs that doctors used to do. And that's primarily driven by costs to the quote unquote healthcare system. It's cheaper for delivery a lot of times for them than it is to pay a doctor. When I was in urgent care, I joined urgent care in 2013 and I left in 2023. When I joined, it was almost all doctors. There was a few nurse practitioners and PAs. And when I left, there was almost all nurse practitioners and PAs. And I can't even remember how many doctors there were in the particular company I work for. I think in the area that I worked, I think there were 2 doctors. And so that's happening all over the place. But anyway, back to my point is the healthcare industry seeks to maximize its own profit, just like the government seeks to maximize its own profit or revenue. That's why government agencies are the next closest thing to eternity that you'll ever see, or a government program, which is run by a government agency, is the closest thing in life that you can see to eternal life. It goes on forever, and it serves itself. Healthcare industry serves itself, and it will serve itself by trying to eliminate costs whenever possible. And one of the ways to eliminate them is to eliminate doctors. And like I said, eventually, if they can eliminate the patient, then that would be ideal. And then all you're left with is the code. And maybe you can get that from a blood sample. Maybe the patients can give blood samples or something. You can diagnose them. Or if you can't eliminate the patient entirely, you eliminate them from your business. And you see that a lot with telemedicine. This is not to say that telemedicine doesn't have its role, but I'm saying when you use it to substitute for regular medicine, there's no substitute. I will say that Dr. Kufferman is completely telemedicine at this point. I do not think there's anybody that goes to his office unless they buy one of his trinkets, one of his power bands or crystals. But Dr. Kufferman he's just doing mostly therapy, and he's got an interesting ability that he actually doesn't need to see you in person. And if you go on the website, he'll kind of give you a hint about that. Anyway, so that's the rundown on concierge medicine, DPC, insurance-based concierge medicine. Completely shifting gears now to you, the boxing fans out there. I would like to talk about boxing. And one of the most popular videos, I will say this, the second most popular video of George Foreman, Michael Moore, round 10 on the internet in the world is by yours truly, Tommy McElroy. And you can see it on the Dr. Tommy Show. It's the round 10 of the Michael Moore George Foreman fight. It has 192,000 views. Now, that is not a lot compared to a lot of people. We have some people in our practice who are very popular on YouTube and will get 1 million views in a matter of a day. And so they would laugh at me. But in terms of boxing, Michael Moore versus George Foreman, round 10, I have the second most popular one. The first most popular has been on the internet for like 13 years, and it's got 8 million views. Mine has got 192,000, and it's been on the internet for 7 years. Anyway, I am going to talk about boxing now, and this is the top 5 hardest hitters. And so I want to start, and these are not in order because I'm going to talk about this later, but first in my list, just to talk about, not the first ever, is Joe Frazier, Smokin' Joe Frazier, who was the heavyweight champion beginning in 1968 when he held a portion of the title, and then was subsequently judged to be the undisputed heavyweight champion in the fight that was previous to this fight. This is the second fight between Joe Frazier and Ali. And the way you know that is because Frazier, I believe, this is the second fight because Frazier is wearing light-colored trunks. In the first fight, he had green trunks. Anyway, this is the second fight, and in the third fight, he had blue trunks. Anyway, so this is the second fight. But in the first fight, Joe Frazier actually beat Muhammad Ali. At that time, both of them were considered heavyweight champions in their own right. Muhammad Ali having been stripped of the title prior to his or subsequent to his refusal to be inducted into the draft during the Vietnam War, and as a conscientious objector, and he was subsequently stripped of his title. His court case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he was overturned at the level of the Supreme Court. And at that point, Ali had already begun to get traction and had been able to start a comeback after being forced from the ring for 3 years, could not get a license to fight. And in his first fight back, he fought Jerry Quarry and beat him by a cut in round 3. And the second fight back, he beat Oscar Bonavena, knocked him out in, I think, the 12th round. And then this is the third fight, was the fight between Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, which brings us back to to Joe Frazier, who was judged by me to be one of the hardest heavyweight champions. He had a left hook probably that surpassed the technique and power of any left hook in boxing history, certainly in heavyweight champion history. And so he was able to knock out many people with the left hook. His right hand was used mostly as I read it once as a parrying tool, meaning that he used it just to knock other blows out of the way or move people's hands out of the way so he could deliver the left hook, which I think he may have scored some knockouts with the right hand, maybe a couple. I don't know of many, but everything was scored with the left hook. And here he is landing a left hook against Muhammad Ali. And so he is my well, I'm not going to do the numbers yet. He's in the top 5. Okay. So he is 205 pounds, 5'11", spark plug, fire hydrant, however you want to describe him. He is that type of fighter, kind of like a prototype of a beefed up Jack Dempsey or Rocky Marciano, and also similar to the build of a Mike Tyson. All right. Speaking of Mike Tyson is also in the list for me. So here's Mike Tyson versus Tyrell Biggs. I believe it's 1987. And Tyrell Biggs was a Olympian who was going to give Tyson potentially one of the toughest challenges of his career up to that point. And he did actually he actually did not give Tyson much of a challenge. Tyson was able to knock him out very quickly. No, sorry, very quickly. He was able to overwhelm him very quickly, but he did not knock him out until round 7. And anyway, Tyson was the youngest heavyweight champion. He was the youngest undisputed heavyweight champion, next to Floyd Patterson. Floyd Patterson was the second youngest. And interestingly enough, both Floyd Patterson and Mike Tyson were trained by Customato, and both were taught the peekaboo boxing style by Customato. So Mike Tyson, he hit hard with both hands. It could be argued that he hit the same with either hand. If I had to give him I would have to say, if anything, his right hand was probably the more powerful hand, but I would not want to get hit with a left hook either. He was a crippling uppercut puncher. He had a lot of torque on his blows. He was able to put so much torque on his blows with his legs and his trunk, and that's what actually was able to make him hit hard. He was not a big guy. He was about the size of Joe Frazier, 205 or so. And so Joe Frazier and Tyson, similar sizes, similar ways that they produced power is through their twisting of the legs, big, thick legs, twisting of the trunk, and velocity. George Chuvalo once said, he had fought both George Foreman and Joe Frazier. He said that getting hit by Joe Frazier was like getting hit by a Pontiac at 100 miles an hour, and getting hit by George Foreman was like getting hit by a Cadillac at 50 miles an hour. So neither one fun, but both of those guys create a lot of power through their velocity. There's actually a video out there. It shows Mike Tyson talking. He's hitting a heavy bag, and someone's asking him about his power and compared it to George Foreman. And Tyson actually says that Foreman hit harder than me, and the reason why was because of the bulk. And so let's go to George Foreman. George Foreman, this is a picture of him. This says 1977, so I'm not going to argue with it. But he was, at this point, toward the end of his first career. George Foreman famously retired in 1977, only to return in 1987 and began a improbable quest to win the heavyweight championship, and did so at the age of 45 in 1994 by knocking out Michael Moore in the video that I just referenced. And the name of that video, if you want to search it, is called Once Upon a Time in the Ring. And if you go to our website, drtommy.com/podcast, you can click on YouTube and then find it from our YouTube channel. But anyway, George Foreman, when he was a young guy, he had velocity, but a lot of his power was just pure raw power. It's just natural, I guess you call it. Because at his peak, he was around 220, and he was 6'3", so obviously had a big frame. But Mike Tyson was also 220, but Mike Tyson was more compact. George Foreman was a big, broad guy, as you can see in this picture. And then when he came back from his retirement, he was bigger. So when he retired, he was in the I think his last fight he was like 228. So he had put on a little bit of weight from his prime. But when he came back in 87, he was 267, and he fluctuated from, that was his high, all the way down to 235 when he fought Dwight Muhammad Qawi in 1988. But he was typically around 250 pounds or more. So 250 to 260 was where he typically operated during his comeback. And George Foreman was, as George Chuvalo said, generated power through mass. So the Cadillac at 50 miles an hour versus the Pontiac at 100. He had big, heavy hands, and he could hit you with a shot anywhere, and hurts. He was not a pinpoint puncher. He did not, aim for any particular place except your general head or your general body. And when it landed, you were generally screwed. One of his best knockouts ever is Ken Norton, and he exemplifies his ability to just overwhelm with power. Ken Norton had gone 12 rounds with Ali, and while Ali was not a heavy hitter, Ali was a very good puncher, accurate puncher, and Foreman took care of him in 2 rounds. So George Foreman is in the top 5. Sheer power, sheer mass. That's the kind of puncher he was. Now, I said there's somebody who doesn't have pinpoint. Foreman was. This is the opposite. This is the assassin, Joe Louis. Joe Louis was a marksman. He put his punches in combination, and he put his punches where they mattered. And he also had the instinct it was almost like a animalistic, and not in a bad way, but he could sense when they were hurt and efficiently take them out. Some of his most famous knockout is Max Schmeling in the second fight, after Schmeling had beaten after Schmeling had upset a seemingly invincible, I think it was 24-year-old Joe Louis, by knocking him out in the 10th round. By the time they met again, Louis was the champion, having beat Jimmy Braddock, and he fought Schmeling and annihilated him in 1 round. But if you look at just punches of the knockout film rolls of Louis, they are some of the most pinpoint punches. Next to Sugar Ray Robinson is another guy they kind of had similar styles, I think, in the way they threw combinations. A lot of the power from Louis from his hook. His hook, I think, was as good as his right hand, although his right hand is probably the most famous. But his hook was deadly, pinpoint accuracy. And like I said, so in contrast to Foreman was not able to punch with the accuracy of Joe Louis. Foreman, if you had a punch meter and they both hit a heavy bag, Foreman's weight of his punch, or the power, quote unquote, of his punch was probably greater. But that's not the only thing that has to do with knocking someone out. And that's why I say that Joe Louis is a big puncher, because Joe Louis put the punch where it mattered and put the punch in combination where it mattered. So people would say, well, that's, you're being crazy, because Joe Louis was, 188 pounds when he was in his prime. He didn't top 200 until after he was older. Now, Joe Louis was, when he quit, I think 218 when he got knocked out by Rocky Marciano. But either way, I still think that at 6'1.5", he had long enough reach, and he had enough power and enough velocity, similar to the way maybe Tommy Hearns created punch power with velocity, not necessarily mass or raw power. That's the way Joe Louis knocked people out, and I put him in the top 5 too. There'll be people who argue with that. Now, last on my list, Sonny Liston, the Big Ugly Bear, also called by Muhammad Ali. So Sonny Liston, more in the manner of George Foreman in terms of his power. Now, I say that also saying that Sonny Liston didn't look at himself as someone who was unskilled. Not that George Foreman thought he was unskilled, but George Foreman never tried, in his first career at least, to try to box anybody. He wanted to basically blow you out of the ring as quickly as possible and be done with it. He was, for better lack of better words, a wild person in his early career. Sonny Liston wanted to be a boxer. Now, I did read once, it was, I think it was Joyce Carol Oates, who said that Sonny Liston's technique was so awkward because he was George Foreman trying to be a Joe Louis, meaning that he was a person with George Foreman's athletic ability, footwork, speed, trying to box like Joe Louis. But Joe Louis and Sonny Liston did have both big, powerful jabs. Sonny Liston probably had, maybe next to George Foreman, or they tied, the best, most powerful telephone pole jab in history. And Sonny Liston actually had the biggest fists of any heavyweight champion in history. It's 15 inches around, if you can believe that. Mine, I think, are 12 or 11. No, I think they're 12. I think they're 10. Maybe 11. Anyway, Sonny Liston's are 15 inches around, and he was 84-inch reach, which is amazing because he was only 6'1". I think it was Joyce Carol Oates, too, who said that Sonny Liston looked like a man who was built in a laboratory to beat people up because he was a 6 foot. She said he was a giant. If it was her, someone said he was a giant that was forced into the body of a man, and so he had this long reach of 84 inches, which is not in proportion to his body. His body, he was only 6'1.5", and so he had this enormous reach. The reach, I think, is only second, at least in prior to 2000. Some of these big Russian guys probably have longer, like Valuev. I'm sure they have longer reaches. But anyway, that's like pre-2000s, before the heavyweight title became so fractured, no one could follow it. The classical type of heavyweight champions. No one had a bigger reach than Sonny Liston except Primo Carnera, I believe. Maybe Jess Willard. But I think actually Jess Willard and Liston may have had the same size reach. And Jess Willard was 6'6¾". So Sonny Liston was a giant smashed into the man of a body, had an enormous reach, an enormous punch, and he had the same type of power as Foreman, big looping punches. And if you wanted to see clinic, if you want to see an example of his destructive force, you could see the Floyd Patterson fights, which were both massacres, one-sided. And if you want to see something a little bit more interesting, you can watch the George Foreman Cleveland Williams fight, both of them. There's two of them. And Cleveland Williams was called the Big Cat. And Cleveland Williams, to me, reminded me a lot of George Foreman. 10 years prior, he was... maybe even 15 years prior than George Foreman was his prime. But Cleveland Williams and Sonny Liston tangled, and I believe it ended in the fourth round and the second round for those fights. And I think the first fight was the fourth round, the second fight was the second round. Anyway, Sonny Liston was able to take out the bigger Cleveland Williams, who was a giant puncher in his own right. But Sonny Liston had big sweeping blows, left hook. He swung from the rafters. And just by the time those 15-inch bowling balls on the end of the 84-inch reach reached your body, you're pretty much done for in most of the cases. Sonny Liston, interesting life. He was born, I think he was the 34th of 34 children. And his father apparently beat him every day. And he had a very difficult childhood, grew up juvenile delinquent, spent a lot of time in jail. It wasn't until he met a Catholic priest who basically said, you need to box. And I forgot his name, his father, something. Anyway, he's the one that pulled Sonny Liston aside and said, you need to box, guided him on that path. And Sonny Liston did well for a little bit, but then old demons came back to haunt him. He was a hard drinker, came involved with probably shadowy figures, or he did become involved with shadowy figures. And there's some people who think that's what ultimately did him in at the age of 39. Although there's some people who said he wasn't really 39, he was more like 50, because his birthday is not really proven how old he was. A lot of people thought he was older than he said he was. So anyway, here's Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston, big, brutal, raw power. Mike Tyson, high velocity, power in both hands. George Foreman, big, raw power. Joe Louis, sharp combination, speed, velocity, pinpoint accuracy. Twisting of the hips is also good with him. And then Joe Frazier, raw power and velocity with the left hook. those are my top five. People who didn't make it, who other people are at home saying, "What are you saying?" Jack Dempsey. Well, Jack Dempsey was like Joe Frazier, but about 20 pounds lighter. And I don't want to get hit by Jack Dempsey, but I think that Joe Frazier may have hit harder. Rocky Marciano, again, built like Joe Frazier, built like Tyson, kind of 20 pounds lighter. I don't think that I think that their mass made it to where they didn't hit as hard. I, again, would not want to be hit by either one of them. Muhammad Ali did a fight with Rocky Marciano. It was a fake fight. It was a computer fight when Ali was in his exile after he was stripped of his title. And he said that in the fake fight, when Marciano was in his 40s, because Marciano died at 46 in a plane crash, but Marciano was in his 40s, and I was actually had been thinking about making a comeback to try to fight Ingemar Johansson in the late 50s. But anyway, this was later. This was about 10 years after that. So this was it was like 1969 maybe. Anyway, they did a computer fight. Marciano's a little bit older. And Ali fought Marciano then, with Marciano wearing a toupee. And they play acted, but Marciano and Ali went to lunch one time with a writer, and Ali lifted up his shirt and showed off the bruises. And he was saying where Marciano was basically not pulling his punches like he was supposed to. So Marciano could definitely hit. I'm not going to detract from that. But that's my top five: Liston, Tyson, Foreman, Lewis, Frazier, honorable mention, Dempsey, Marciano, Jim Jeffries. And I'm not even going to get into this new guys because I don't know anything about them. I have to stop watching boxing after probably 2000 just because it just became so fractured and just uninteresting to me. But I know Vitaly Klitschko had a big punch. His brother Vladimir had a big punch. Deontay Wilder apparently has a big punch. And George Foreman even said that he thought Deontay Wilder, I think, was the hardest puncher ever. But George Foreman was prone to saying things like that. But anyway, that's my top five. So thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Tommy Show. Go to drtommy.com/podcast and then click on little Dr. Kufferman's face if you want to get some information from him. And it is joke therapy only there. So if you're out there and you're taking it for real, you're going to the wrong place. It's joke therapy. It says it right there on the film, right there on the screen. Anyway, Dr. Tommy Show, thank you for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
It was the cosmos that brought us here. Now it's time for me to do their work.